Hello, everyone. It is Misha Green, DC and digital content editor, and I am really ecstatic to be talking with Chloe Louvouezo today. We have a lot to talk about, but also we're celebrating, I think, in a
Yes,
major way, because Chloe's second book, is that correct?
yes,
Is dropped just yesterday. I think appropriately the second book on November 2nd.
mm, yes,
Life I Swear is the name of it. And it tells the stories of different Black women and their journeys and their trajectories. And I've gotten a chance to peek into some
yes.
of the pages. And oh my gosh, just Chloe, thank you so much for this work. It is absolutely everything I feel like I need as I just turned 30 and I'm sort of like figuring life out. And just to hear these other stories and read these other stories has been already rewarding for me. And I've barely been able to really get into it. So thank you so much, first of all. But
Yes.
how are you doing? How are you? We're still in the middle of a pandemic. I guess that's a
I
big
know, no. And for that, I will start. I am in full gratitude and to be able to have an idea, plant a few seeds, ask your community and people women you admire to be part of that community, to do something for the greater good of our well-being in the midst of a pandemic. And then to see it manifest and land in the hands and in the homes and the hearts of other women. I am just like, first and foremost, just so grateful. But like we said before, before we went live, there are a spectrum of feelings. I'm feeling all the feels, and some of them are very anxious feelings because these essays include some of my own, as well as essays from 26 other Black women, all very diverse, and a lot of them are very vulnerable. And so, in that way, to a degree, it feels like handing over a journal or a diary. And so it's a new space to be so open, but I really do feel like that is for me my personal journey of getting more closer to authenticity, in just being truth tellers of our own narratives. So I'm feeling good about that and the momentum that that brings. And even though it forces us into like uncomfortable spaces sometimes, it's definitely the necessary work.
Absolutely. I want to shout out our managing editor and also an amazing author herself, Reverend Dorothy Bulweir, who said, "Thanks for visiting Afro Land, Chloe.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Definitely appreciate it." So I guess let's start from the very beginning, which
Yeah.
is this is what you do. You're all about empowering others and self care and
Mhm.
ensuring that messages of positivity,
Yeah.
particularly for Black women, is shared across your social media. I've been doing
Mhm.
some fun social media stalking over the
Yes.
past few days. But tell us how you sort of began your journey into empowering others, and then we'll get into your work as an author.
Yes. I'm leaning into that author title as of yesterday. So thank you for forcing it on me, and I'll receive it. But my work with supporting other women, I think for me, Black women in particular, being a woman of color myself, and knowing how uncomfortable physically you can feel and mentally, emotionally you can feel when you're in spaces that aren't reflective and representative, and in the best interest of who you are when you just show up. And so for me, it's been just so endearing and so comforting to retreat back to my community of Black women. And I do think that my community of Black women is all Black women, just in this universal understanding of how our life experiences overlap and are shared. My love of stories and people in general really comes from my background. I grew up in Niger, West Africa. I am Congolese American. I've had a really diverse, transient, like catch all kind of background in terms of my life path. I've moved around a lot. And so, just in every season of my life, with every family that I've lived with, every country, every city, whether it was, Harlem or literally Mali, West Africa, I'm just so in love with stories because I think there is real dignity in everyone's story. And then relating that to my experience as a Black woman in the US, where dignity is stripped so often across industries and sectors, but also across media, across relationships. For me, it's about restoring that dignity. And that's why I chose, to really hone in on the experience of Black women and for once giving them the mic and being able to let them tell their story themselves. And for me, too, doing that exercise alongside the other contributors is such an empowering experience and opportunity that only we can give ourselves, because so often our stories are told on behalf of us.
Sorry, on mute. I'm just so inspired, y'all. I've had to mute myself because I caught myself going,
Mm,
so much.
mm,
But no, I think uh, that notion of the importance of everyone's story having so much
mhm,
dignity, is so inspiring. And again, you giving Black women the
mhm,
opportunity to share their own in a world where very often, as you so eloquently said, others speak for us.
mhm.
I is so powerful. So thanks for that. When did you have the light bulb moment to do this? Was this a pandemic decision, with more time on your hands, or when was that moment where you said, "Let's give this a stab"?
Ooh, it was after a Life I Swear kind of year. And, the Life I Swear is really, it's just something you say when you are literally in reflection about the life that you are in the middle of experiencing, processing, having revelations around. And it's kind of that sigh, like, life, man, I swear. And these stories are too, like, this year that I'm speaking of, which was 2019, it was so rich in revelations, because it literally like knocked me to my feet. Um, and it was a trying year. This is 2019 before the pandemic. And I do talk about it in the book, but it was a year where, I had essentially lost a family. I went through a separation and then lost a pregnancy.
Mm,
And I have a 5-year-old son as well. And, for me, the decision to like do something as bold and drastic and have the audacity to like reach for the stars in terms of telling my story came after feeling that my story was, or I guess my circumstance to that point had just made me feel so small. And
mm,
so, when you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, that's when you do something really drastic to change it around. And it's not about changing the circumstances of your life. It's around about changing how you're viewing them, your own perception of your life, not the things that from the outside would look nice or feel good. But how are you speaking affirmation from the inside out? And that's the thing I knew I needed to change the most. And putting everything that I had grappled with for years and, from childhood up until this point of something's got to change, putting that on paper was the only way I know how as a writer. it's like the best expression of myself.
Yeah.
But knowing that that's such a therapeutic practice for me, and I think it was just a season of new beginnings. I have the opportunity to rewrite the narrative that I'm speaking into myself, and then demand and require that others like speak it to me as well. And I think that that's a boundary and a necessity that all Black women need to um, are only better for. And so I decided to write this book in January 2020, actually,
Wow.
right before the pandemic. And then I was going back and forth between should I do a book? Should I do a podcast? Because as I'm collecting stories for the book, these are just like these nuggets that these women are pouring into their own essays needs to be captured. Like these are conversations. Our revelations come, at least for me, I need to talk it out with a girlfriend. And so that's what lent itself to a podcast. And it just ended up being perfect timing because everyone else in the year that I had, the 2019, where I was really grappling with some things, I took a year sabbatical from work and just for mental health. And then it was perfect timing for the book because then the pandemic, perfect, I use that loosely, happened, and everyone else was able to also have that year. And so collectively, we're seeing the importance of really being still with ourselves and how are we doing our work so that we re-enter the world new and more, I don't know, enlightened um, or deeper connected with ourselves versions, and then requiring the world to meet us where we are now. I think is just going to be powerful, not just a testament to this book, but just the trend and the wave of self-care and self-love that Black women have really been investing in this past year.
I love this. I could just talk to you all day about this because I got some stories to share myself.
And it's funny because you're like, you're on the cusp of entering into your 30s. And I think that our 30s are, and I'm 36, they're a season of like, I know some things. There are some things I don't know. I am certain about some things, but I'm still uncomfortable a little bit with ambiguity about the future. And so for me, it's getting like finding that sweet spot, especially after going through the 20s where, there were so many ebbs and flows, it's hard to keep up with them sometimes. So
Yeah.
now it's about finding that sweet spot and like that pace that works for us. And I think doing that in sisterhood is just makes it all the more bearable. And you can survive some things because you have some testimonies under you, but you're still a student of life. And for me, that's what this book is. I think for me, I've let me share my stories, but also open myself up to what I can learn or how my perspectives can shift from another Black woman's story and welcoming vulnerability when the world makes us like fighters, for against everything, like career and our commute to the workplace, even before we get to work.
Yes.
We're like on edge. So let's like invite that like softness that really is and should be our redefined definition of strength.
Mm.
And so I think the 30s are beautiful because they are messy.
All right. I needed that. I am taking your word for it. Um, but I'm really appreciating your sharing that it's through testimonies that have also helped you sort of grow and navigate during this time. I'm wondering how you have been able to learn and grow. If you could share just some sort of you don't have to give all details, but if you could just share a little bit of your testimony in creating this podcast as well as the book, how you've been able to learn and grow.
Yeah, it's interesting because as I've even gone through the process of putting this book together, I have learned and learned more about myself because I've been able to um, in the responsibility of writing your story, you have the responsibility to be like honest. You can't write your story and then hold certain things in denial, or you can't write your story but only write the convenient parts of it. Um, or write the parts that only make you look good, you know? And so for me, like really, really pushing through and asking myself questions like, why did you do that again? And the parts of myself that I had gotten um conveniently like disconnected or disassociated with, where I felt like I don't really have anything in common anymore with the last version of myself who might have subjected herself to certain relationships or put herself in whatever. But to reconnect with my past self, it's like really trying to give her grace, understand her thought pattern. And that was to me a learning experience because, I think resilience, I've always considered myself a resilient person,
Mm,
but I do think that resilience isn't it's not resilience um if you're like just jumping over things that you're really supposed to go through, to me resilience is really letting the things that traumatic experiences really sink in, because when you bounce off too quickly you start to get into cycles because you're not understanding why you did the thing before. And so for me, it's okay. The only way for me to stop cycles, whether it's me doing or me receiving certain cycles that were unhealthy, let me really understand them, flesh them out, dissect them one by one, whether it's year by year. Like at 21 I got in this relationship, at 23 I did this, and some of them I'm not proud of, but let me like actually bring them to the present and get familiar with them. And that was such a learning experience of myself because for the first time, I'm tapping into curiosity of my younger self versus really glossing over. That was an experience. And then, I mean, just generally, it's been amazing to understand when you're like deep into your own personal healing work, how the capacity that you have to grow so quickly. Like I wrote the first draft and turned it in October 2020. And by the time I had to edit them, all of my drafts 6 months later, I felt like I had a new perspective on a lot of the things that I had written at a place of heartbreak,
mm,
and so just giving myself space to evolve my feelings and my reactions and emotions around certain traumas that I document in this book, that has been liberating because it's allowed me to feel very proud of um, just how fast you can actually grow when you are like really digging in.
yeah.
And I think that in that like year that I spent with editing and writing, that growth could probably be equated to the last 3-4 years of spiritual and emotional and mental growth because I was in a space of more denial in those earlier years. So it's been interesting. Me, myself, and I.
I love it. And your adorable little baby boy. I he's just the cutest. I love him and his little smile on your face
Yeah.
brings so much joy. But yeah, that me, myself, and I'm sure as you balance being a mom and
Mm.
separation and uh a miscarriage and all of that, how have you, and working on a new book and a podcast, how have you also prioritized self-care, or has been working on these projects been your self-care?
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting because yes, working on these projects has been my self-care. I think, so often when we and I think this might apply to a lot of women, particularly before the pandemic, when we attach our validation or our self-worth to other things of this world, whether it's the job and how productive we are, or whether it's family, friendships, romantic relationships, how much we can either produce or provide or show up for other people. And so the self care is really about investing in yourself. And
Mhm.
for everyone, that means something different. Um, for me, the investing in myself really is about understanding myself, which I do through writing, but then also understanding like what are my triggers. Um, so that when I feel like I'm entering into unsafe spaces, I can have discernment as to where and when and with whom I should be setting boundaries, but also like setting boundaries with myself.
Mm.
I think even in the making of this book, while it was just such a therapeutic practice, I can get like a little neurotic about making something perfect. And as long as I am handling whatever I am working with, whether it's this project or relationships with others or myself or my son, it's like handling it with ease.
Mm.
If it's not with ease, I don't want it. And just having that as a rule of thumb for me is my self-care, because when something is feeling forced or is feeling manipulated or is feeling rushed and not at the pace that it's meant to be. And so for me, just like being hypersensitive to like the yeses and the like any tension is like a no for now. I think that's really um, your intuition speaking to you, and listening to that is for me the best self-care.
I'm taking handling things with ease from you. I'm going to try to apply that to my life today and
Yes,
always. And I love the any tension is a no for now.
for
Um,
now, yeah.
for now, I think the for now piece is really important as well. I'm learning so much. I knew this was gonna happen. It was just gonna be like a catch up with an old friend. And guys,
Yes.
my first time meeting Chloe. um, so tell us, I know that there are some uh, recognizable names, I should say, in the 26 women who share their stories in essays in Life, I Swear. But can you give us a little tease on some of the people who we might hear from,
Yes.
as well as maybe a little bit of their stories?
Yeah, absolutely. I deeply like love all of these women, and I did not know personally all of these women before I set out to write this book. So it's been just I really do think that this book is like community in like physical form. But we have some friends, some women are friends that I've known for years, starting with the forward and an essay was written by Elaine Welteroth, who also has been kind of my doula. She's a published author as well. Um, Alex L is in the DMV, and she's an amazing writer and poet, and she does breath work and meditation, and she's a beautiful soul and healer. We have also in that sort of like healing space, Lauren Ash. She's the founder of Black Girl in Own. And then Dion Ivory, I've fallen in love with her work. She's a creative director, but she's also the founder of an organization called The Body, A Home for Love, which is all around supporting Black women who are survivors of sexual assault. Um, And then we have, let's see, we have Julie Wilson, who's a homegirl, and she is the global beauty director of Cosmo. I mean, literally the list goes on. Kima Safir, who's founded Hannah Magazine.
Yes.
Um, we have some of my dearest friends, Brookhall and Ophabia, Obuba. It is really a collection. Everyone else on here, I mean, I'm looking at Morgan and Lily and Neka and Eniafe. They're all like really creative in their own right. And I think naturally, not all of them would coin themselves creatives,
Mhm.
but I do think there is like a connection between whether you're a formal creative or formal writer or not, but being able to tap into your spirituality is a form of creativity because you are like really trying to like discover yourself and discover the world and express it in some way. And so I think all of the women fall under that. And I want to also mention um, Lindsay Farrar, who's the founder of Crown Mag. All of these women are dedicated to our collective work in some way. And I am, a lot of them are my muses. And I just feel lucky to have been able to have them trust me with their stories because the stories really run the gamut of we talk about uh, childhood trauma, we talk about sexual abuse, we talk about relationships with men or with ourselves, and there are stories about family. There are stories about identity and race and grief and loss and love and for them to like seriously hand over their story to me and trust me to share it with the world is not something that I take lightly or for granted. And I'm just grateful. This is also day 2, so I'm like really cheesy and geeky, but these
No,
are all the beautiful women reflected in this.
that's beautiful. Beautiful. No, you should be super cheesy and excited. I mean, as I said, I can't stop smiling because I'm so inspired just from hearing your process
Yeah.
and the people who decided to share their stories. And, not obviously not everything sounds pretty and beautiful,
Mhm.
which the Black women's experience is not always right.
Mhm.
But I think again that testimony
Yeah.
is so incredibly important and will help us all
Yeah.
in the end. So I told you we would be talking to 15-20 minutes, and of course that did not happen. But my last question, and if those in the comments have any burning questions, please feel free to drop it in the comments now and we'll try to get to you. We see you tapping in and tuning in, though. Hi, Octavia. Hi, Laura. Hi, Bonnie. Hi,
Mhm.
Rev. I'm going to give a special shout out and not say Mike Green, who said he's tuning in from Medellin. But that's my daddy. So, hi, daddy. um, but wanted to know how your work, and I should have said this in your introduction, you're also on the DC Commission on Women, correct?
Mm.
And I wanted to know how your work with the Commission on Women has sort of shaped your current work as a creative and
Oh,
as a
interesting.
writer and as a woman who works to empower other women.
Yeah, so I was just I think we got sworn in at the end of August, early September. So that actually is recent. And I'm excited to support initiatives from the mayor that support women in the city, and the committees span from, economic empowerment to health and wellness, maternal health. And it's just exciting to be part of a community locally that are committed to that. And, in a previous career, when I was in New York, I worked for a health and human services agency. And so and actually that's part of where and how I really started to hone in my storytelling and that concept of like dignity in everyone's story. Because I've done a lot of grassroots on the ground work with people who were experiencing homelessness or experiencing mental health challenges, but who have a story, who have potential. Obviously, some of these more vulnerable populations, there is already a narrative written for them already, just like you know for Black women, and it is unfair. And if there is any level of support I can give in changing the narrative from a storytelling perspective, I think that when we hear stories or when we hear labels that are slapped on us, we start to internalize those, and it becomes a self-sabotaging process when we intake those labels and those outside perceptions, and we take them, we internalize them, and they become part of our sense of self. And then it gets hard. Then it just is a taller mountain to climb to out of that. And so for me, I root everything in storytelling, really. But I also think that when we are in vulnerable conditions in our lives, one of it, it's easy to say, get a job, or it's easy to say, be proactive, do XYZ. But if we don't have a strong sense of self, then I think the mental health is like literally foundational to us being able to change our lives around. And so, while that work hasn't yet begun with the commission, it's definitely one area in which I definitely hope to support women in the city.
I am so ready to see all the amazing things that you do as a newly appointed member on the
Mhm.
commission. And I must ask in advance that when those initiatives come into play, that you come back on Afro Live and
Yes.
with us.
Absolutely. I am so excited for this commission. It's a 3-year term, and it's an amazing group of women who are part of the commission. And there is so much to be done in the next 3 years, but I'm glad to be part of the momentum.
Absolutely. Well,
Mhm.
we are glad, and as a native Washingtonian, I have to say, I am personally happy that someone like you is helping to fight for
Mhm.
women here in this city and our
Yeah.
rights and needs, and ability to take up spaces
Mhm.
even further. I should say, yesterday we had Cora Masters Berry, who, of course, is the former First Lady of Washington, D.C., but is also on the Commission on
Mhm.
Arts and Humanities. And she and Dr. Natalie Hopkinson from Howard University actually had been recommended by the mayor to be reappointed. And it was a whole
Mhm.
thing that they were blocked from their hearing for reappointment. They are back on the commission, thank goodness.
Good.
But we talked a lot about the fact, I know Mrs. Berry personally, and how she's always been committed to empowering other people and education. And she's not gonna, step down and take any crap, if you will,
Right, right.
in ensuring that all people have
Mhm.
their rights, etc. And of course, that was an arts and humanities conversation.
Mhm.
But I have a feeling that Chloe is going to be doing the same thing.
Yes, make sure you speak my language.
Yes. So Chloe, I have your website linked here, and we'll make sure to link it in the comments after this conversation so folks can easily click on your website. But tell us how they can find you and keep in touch with you, and where they
Yeah.
can purchase Life I Swear and listen
Yes.
to the podcast.
Yes, I So all things that I'm working on live on my website, chloelouvouezo.com, and that also has links to social. In terms of purchasing books, of course, you can go on Amazon and leave a review. You can go to Barnes and Nobles, Target, Walmart. But I really encourage whoever's listening to purchase from their local independent bookstore in DC, Mahogany Books, Busboys and Poets, Politics and Prose. Those count in terms of sales, but also they support small and mid-sized businesses. And on November 14th, I'll be at Busboys with Christine Platt, who's also a DMV-based author, and we will be in conversation, having one of those like I swear conversations on the 14th of this month at 6:30.
That's amazing. And is this at which Busboys location, I should say?
Yeah, this is the 14th Street location, Northwest, off of U Street.
Yep. So all those in the DMV, you know how to get there, but support, whether it's picking it up at, as Chloe said, at a local bookstore, or tuning in. I guess that's now 11 days away. So
Yeah.
less than 2 weeks away, and to support Chloe and Christine Platt, both amazing DC based women and folks and writers who are doing good work. So I'm really excited about that conversation. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All things, this, is, as I said before, really encouraging for me, as I am on my own personal journey, and I'm sure for all those, and this has been inspiring as well. I encourage all those to share this stream. I always say sharing is caring, and not because I like the cool rhyming of it all. It is because it is really true, and the fact that this information really can help your village. And this stream will exist as long as Facebook and YouTube exist. So there's no excuse in making sure that the folks in your community and your village know about Life I Swear, know about this wonderful woman and all the work that she's doing, and all the wonderful women featured in Life I Swear and their stories. So please share this stream, folks. We really appreciate you for tuning in. Thank you so much, Chloe, for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Misha. It's just been a pleasure. You're such a delight.
Well, thank you. You are such a light, and I just thank you for sharing that light with so many people and using your platform for good. And really excited about all that you have coming for I'm going to say us as in the world, but also here in Washington, D.C. in particular. I know it's great stuff. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to all those tuning in. We appreciate you. Be safe. Remember, Black Lives Matter, and take care.